based out of LA.
Yep. Yeah. So we launched Liquid Death in a bit of a backwards way than most, I think, beverage brands launch, which was we launched a year before we met science. We launched Liquid Death on social media before we ever had product, because we knew that with such a crazy idea like Liquid Death, there's nobody who's writing me a check for the idea of Liquid Death. They're like, this is stupid. You're crazy. Like, who would ever buy this? It's a negative name. It says death. Retailers will never carry it, yada, yada, yada. So I knew that I had to prove it out as a concept on social first before I could actually make people feel like I'm de-risking this thing a bit to actually raise. So we designed the can to look like a 3D realistic can. We shot a $1,500 video, and then we just put it on Facebook. No Twitter, no Instagram, just Facebook. We put maybe, I don't know, $3,000 in paid media behind the video. And then cut to 3 months later, we have more Facebook followers than Aquafina. The video has 3 million views. We've got a range of DMs from, hi, I am a 7-Eleven franchisee in the Midwest. How do I get this in my stores? Or, hi, I'm the biggest non-alc beverage distributor in New York City called Big Geyser. How do we talk to a sales representative to distribute this? And we didn't even have product yet,
Right.
or no idea of how we were even going to really make it. So then I used all of that social traction and distributor interest and retailer interest to then start raising a small friends and family round so we could actually produce physical product. Because with cans, the minimums are really, really high. Like 250,000 cans is the lowest you can actually produce with a can manufacturer. So it's a little bit capital intensive just to even start playing the game.
How much is a quarter million? How much, a $250,000 of product? What would that cost? I mean, if you're just starting, what would that cost?
I mean, it all depends what you're filling in there. But you're talking, 150, 200, 250 grand just to like kind of get started, probably, doing cans. So yeah, once we then kind of raised a little bit, we started producing cans. We bottle, or I should say we can and source our water in Austria, in the Alps. Once we had physical cans that people
let me ask you,
yeah.
what does that mean whenever people are like, oh, this is, spring water from this mountain? It's like, my head is always like, this is BS. What does this mean? Does that matter? Like, A, is this true? B, does that matter? So like, why do you go get your water from Austria in the Alps? Like, what is that? Is that branding? Is that like, is there something about water that I don't know? Like, why do you have to go there to get your water?
So let's be totally honest. Water, for the most part, I should say, for most people, is water.
Yeah.
Like if you had people try to, even water snobs, if you had them blind taste test Fiji versus Evian versus whatever, can they really tell the difference? Probably not, right? But
I've done this test many times as an Evian drinker. Evian and Fiji taste similar to me. Evian versus Crystal Geysler, like it tastes different. I've bet money and I've got it right before.
That's interesting. But yeah, I think the things that make water, that affect the taste of water, are the natural minerals and how much of them there are in the water, and the pH of the water. Is it more acidic? Is it more basic? And what those minerals are affect how acidic or how basic it is. So for us, our water comes from the Alps, and it literally goes right from the mountain into the can. Obviously, it goes through filters and things that filter out debris and all of that. And then we put it through like a pasteurization process that makes sure everything, it's all clean and good to go. But everything in that water that's the natural mineral profile of the water that has been built up over probably hundreds of years in the mountain. And it's like, naturally alkaline at 7.8 or 7.9 pH. It's got a nice mineral level, nice mouth feel when you're drinking it because of the level of minerals. So that comes right off that way. Everything's natural about it. Almost every major water brand in the US, whether that's Smart Water, Essentia, Aquafina, Dasani, most of those brands, they're using tap from the, that then they reverse osmosis, which strips everything out of water, all the natural minerals, all the bad stuff, everything. So it's literally just like empty water. Then they have to add in minerals back in to kind of make it taste good. So they'll add in the natural things that occur in water, but just kind of artificially with just doing it at the factory to kind of make something that has a decent pH and a decent mineral profile that tastes good. So those are kind of the two options. When you say something is spring water, it's very strict from the FDA of what that has to be. Like, to call it spring water, you cannot alter the original mineral profile of the water. So even if you take it off the mountain, if you put it through reverse osmosis and it strips out the natural minerals and you add them back in, you can't call it spring water anymore because you've altered the original thing. So, you know, our water, like I said, that's kind of how we think about it. Everything we have in our water is natural. That's how it comes off the mountain. It's kind of its own perfect thing. We don't have to go through the whole process of like using municipal tap water from the factory, stripping everything out, adding stuff in, and kind of like creating a water.
Right.
You know, that's really
okay. And you know, I've never actually had Liquid Death. It's flat water though, right? It's not sparkling and it's not flavored.
We have a sparkling version, but so we have a still and a sparkling. Yeah.
And so you sorry, just to sort of finish it. So you took that, you know, you raised a little bit, you did the social media to prove, hey, we can build a fun brand that people resonate with. Then you figured out, okay, to produce the minimum run, I'm going to need a couple $100,000 to get this thing off the ground. And you raised kind of the friends and family round. That was from Science, or afterwards Science came about and they wrote a bigger check?
We raised the friends and family round just to basically cover like a super limited, you know, the smallest run of product we could do.
Right.
And then once I finally had a physical can of Liquid Death for the first time, which was probably around October of 2018, we had a guy that we knew who knew someone at Science who said, hey, you guys should really talk to Science. Like, they'd probably be all over this. So we went and met with Science and brought them a physical can. And once someone could really hold it, and it wasn't just like us showing digital images from social, it made it way different. It just like, they understood the magic of it and how cool this would be walking around with this, or how, you know, how into this people would be. So then that's when we kind of decided to do a deal with Science. And over the next 2 months after that, they helped us gear up our D2C launch, where we launched online in January of last year.
And do you think this will be mostly D2C? You think this will be retail? How do you think about that? Obviously, you're doing both. Where do you think is the kind of bulk of the business going to come from?
I think we've always known it was going to be retail from the beginning. We just didn't know how soon do you start really pushing into retail. Water is something that you don't want to just order on the internet. Like, you want to be able to buy a water when you're thirsty somewhere.
Right.
So it's just naturally a retail play versus like, you know, something like maybe like a Soylent that's like a meal replacement thing. You could order those to your front door because it's not like you just randomly deciding to go get one of those. But now they're pushing into retail as well. But
what's your pitch on how big this gets? And the way I like these pitches is kind of like bottoms up. So it's like, you know, rather than saying, you know, well, vitamin water sold for this much, so maybe we can get that much or more because blah, blah, blah. But like bottoms up being like, you know, there's this many grocery stores. I don't know if you think that way, but like, do you have that sort of analysis of like, I think this gets this big because I can say that there's this many venues or this many grocery stores or this much D2C demand of this. So I think we can, you know, when we grow up, we can become this big. Do you think that way, or how do you approach that?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of things. I mean, one, you can obviously start at what is the size of the bottled water market, which in 2019, the bottled water market in the US alone was $20 billion for just bottled water. Still water made up a little under 15 billion of that 20, and sparkling is about 3.5 billion of that 20. So it's a massive market.
And what's the rest? Flavored?
Like private label.
Okay.
Yeah, and flavored stuff in there. The biggest retail in terms of doors channel is convenience stores. There's like over 150,000 convenience stores. And then I think there's maybe, I don't know, I think there's maybe 30,000 grocery stores or something like that. And then restaurants and on premise. Like restaurants and bars, there's about 1 million in the US. So you can start looking at, velocities of what certain water brands do in convenience stores. We can look at some of our velocities that we're seeing and what they could grow to. And yeah, you can really start to like forecast out how big this gets. But it's like, well-performing water brands just in 7-Eleven can be doing 50 million in sales just in 7-Eleven in scanned sales for like, a decent water brand. And that's just 7-Eleven.
Who are the top three?
The top water brands in terms of scale are, as you could probably imagine, like Aquafina and Dasani. They're both over $1 billion.
And those are owned by Nestle and or who are those owned by?
Is it Pepsi?
Aquafina's Pepsi, Dasani is Coke.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
And then Nestle's the other big one. Nestle has a couple brands like Nestle, Pure Life, and kind of the more budget value water. And yeah, they're over $1 billion as well.
Who owns and how much? So Fiji's owned by Wonderful Brands. They're down near you in LA, right? Or I don't know if you're in LA, but in LA, how much revenue do you think Fiji and Evian does? I think Fiji's a privately owned company. Is Evian public? I don't know.
I don't know the exact numbers. I've seen a couple things, so I can't really comment if they're accurate or not. But I assume that Fiji, Evian, they're probably somewhere around like 500 million a year, something like that, I would guess.
What would the margin on that be? So, is it as big as I would think?
It's not as big as you think, really, because the retailers, they want the most margin on bottled water. Like they want to mark up bottled water higher than almost any other beverage that they have in the store. So the retailer wants a lot of margin. And then you've got distributors that need their margin. So it's like you really get down, it's not like bottled water is some like insane margin for suppliers than other products,
Right.
Like energy drinks probably getting more margin than water is.
Which I think the conception is, dude, they're just bottling water. That's like, you're like selling air. But in reality, the margin is probably, I would guess, sub 30%, not above 30%. Is kind of my guess.
Yeah, I think in most beverage, they say like, a target, like really solid margin for beverage would be like 40%. That's like 50% is like, you're killing it.
Right.
And then it's like, I think you get down like to 30 is probably like on the low end of what you want. But yeah.
So when I used to own a chain of hot dog stands in Nashville, and when it was called Southern Sam's, wieners as big as a baby's arm. And I would crush it on bottled water. In the daytime, bottled water would cost $2 or $3. And at nighttime, when everyone's drunk, you definitely add a little bit more to it. I think from Restaurant Depot, I think a bottle of water was 14 cents. It was like stupid. And so the hot dogs would like make a little bit of money. I would you can make $1,000 a day off bottled water. That was where the money was the bottled water. That was definitely.
If you need a sales guy, you got Sam here.
Yeah, man, I was hawking water like crazy. That was where it was at.
Mike, we had this question, which was, if you had to make $1,000 tomorrow, but I stripped you of all your kind of like current income streams and your current business, how would you go try to make $1,000 in a week or whatever? And I think Sam's was, I would go to a hot place, I would buy waters for 14 cents and go sell them in front of a stadium or something like that.
In a corner, like at the stoplight. Because like people don't care about the water, they more so care about the convenience. Like, oh fuck it, it's right here.
I totally overthought it, and I was like, well, I guess I would create this online store, and I was like, no, it's too slow, too complicated. Go sell
I would be like a vendor at a concert series, like the summer concert series that Cities has. I swear to God, I would make $1,000 a day in bottled water sales. You just, that's not every day, but you crush it at those concerts, just selling bottled water. That was where I would make a killing. What other opportunities have you seen that if you weren't starting this business, you would be very interested in? Like things that you've discovered along the way? There's
two questions, right? Because our audience, the listeners for this, right? We got hundreds of thousands of listeners who are going to hear this, and they're all entrepreneurial types. But really, it's not like they're going to go and do one of these things, but they just love to hear different perspectives. It's like you in the world a few of us even think about on a daily basis. So you're seeing things and seeing communities, thinking about things that we don't see, which is why you came up with this idea to begin with. And so they really do love to hear kind of like, I've always thought you could do this, and it doesn't have to be a great idea. It could be I just noticed that this thing really crushes it, or these are kind of backwards. I think it might be fun to try this. Do you have anything that could complete that sentence?
Yeah, I mean that is a tough one. Like, I mean, I guess obviously, like, you're always looking for white space, right? I think where I was really inspired most by my point of view on business and branding is from Virgin, like Richard Branson. Early in my advertising career when I worked in San Francisco, the main account that I worked on was Virgin America, the airline. So I got like super deep into Virgin and I read, Richard Branson books, and I just loved that their model was like, we go and try to find a stale category and we make the one really cool, fun brand within that category where it almost changes the category, where the rest of the category almost has to start adapting. Like airlines, like nobody was excited to get on an airplane or eat airplane food or anything. And then they were the first ones to make planes with like neon blue lighting and like, TVs in every seat, which now is like a common thing in every airline now, right? So it was like, that really inspired my way of looking at, where I would look for things that were like, what is something that, like you said, like cottage cheese, like what is something that is extremely boring, or like what's a category that just nobody cares about, or you can't think of one cool brand in. And obviously, like if it's something that seems like it could still have appeal, it's just the victim of poor brands not getting it and just not innovating or whatever it might be, and you see an opportunity, hey, this is actually could be a thing that people really would love, but it's just been stuck in this like doldrums of branding for so long that it needs something. Because at the end of the day, especially with packaged goods, like branding is so much more important than most suppliers or companies think.
Right.
Because most companies are started by business people in the most part. It's like someone with an MBA, someone who understands the nuts and bolts of building a business. It's rare that businesses are started by creative people, like artists and people that are, graphic designers and stuff. Like it's two different things. And usually what happens is the business folks think really rationally, like, okay, my product contains this, so the name of the product should be about that. And I should list all the rational reasons why someone should buy this. Yeah, right. It's like, and then that gets them a certain part of the way, but then they end up hiring a creative agency to get all these creative thinkers in to build a story around this boring thing to make people actually care about it. So what I think is interesting is when you have creative people at the very beginning of the process, where it's like just considering what the company should be, what the name should be, what the product should even look like. Will someone even care about whatever it is you're selling? Because I think the creative people do have a good sense of culturally what's going on, what's cool, what do people care about, what's the climate. Business people, not so much. I feel like they're more in like the nuts and bolts and weeds of like numbers and manufacturing, which is hugely important, which is why there's so many brands that never get the creative side, but still they just become these logistical Swiss Army knives that still get acquired.
Right.
But it's like, just imagine if they had great creative too. You might be a $2 billion